Welcome to this another session on saturation church planting. We are going to do a little Bible study from Acts chapter 2, 42 to 47. And in this chapter we will see how the early church, the Jerusalem church, functioned. 3,000 people had been baptized on the day of the Pentecost. And now we will see how the disciples and the new believers interacted and brought them to maturity. In Acts 2:42 it says that those who and they continued steadfastly in the apostles' doctrine, teaching, and fellowship, in the breaking of bread, and in prayers. 4 things they did. And in this we see the first thing they do is apostolic teaching. The apostolic teaching is very different from the regular teaching. You can go to church Sunday after Sunday and hear the sermons, no change. But apostolic teaching is something when apostles teach, they reproduce apostles. And apostles are people who are messengers. They take the gospel from people to people and from place to place. So we see here that apostolic teaching takes place, which is basically the Great Commission teaching. Go and make disciples of all nations, baptize them, equip them, send them, and so on. So this is apostolic teaching. It's a very challenging teaching, and it inspires people to obey the Great Commission. The second thing they do is they have fellowship. And this fellowship is, the Greek word is koinonia. It's not just hello, hello fellowship as we often see in the church. We just greet people by saying hello, hello. This is a family relationship kind of thing that people love each other. A very intense kind of fellowship, relational. And so we see people relating to each other as a family members because they now know that they are members of the family of God. Ephesians 2:19, they know that they are family of God, and so it's a relational thing. It is not just ordinary membership of the church kind of fellowship. And third thing we see is table fellowship, is breaking of bread and eating meals together. When they are a family, and when a family gets together, whatever else they do, they certainly have a meal together. And we see this early church in Jerusalem, whenever they met, wherever they met, they had meals together. And that's part of the family fellowship. And the fourth thing they did was prayer. And this prayer again is a different kind of prayer. When we read in the following chapters, we find that this is a kind of intercessory prayers. They have a lot of persecution, they have a lot of opposition, they are put in the jail in the temple itself, and so their prayer is prayer which relates to expansion of the kingdom and the troubles and the problems they have, and they pray for people's redemption, they pray for the redemption of the city, they pray for more power, and they pray for more signs and wonders to take place in Jerusalem. So it's a much more intense kind of prayer. It's not ordinary prayer. And these things they do, it says in verse 42, in the beginning itself, it says, and they continued steadfastly. And this is not just steadfastly in prayer. They are doing all these 4 things steadfastly. They are the apostles, when they are teaching, and when they are learning, when they are interacting with each other, they are doing with great intensity. When they are having fellowship and they are greeting each other, it's like a family meeting each other, hugging each other, kissing each other. It's a much more relational thing. When they are eating food, they do it with great gusto, and then they enjoy their food. And it's not the thing that we see normally in our churches, a little wafer and a little wine, a sip of wine, but it's proper food that they are having, and when they are praying, they are really praying. So everything they do with zeal. It's a zealous church, and so naturally wonderful things happen. In the next verse, in verse 43 we see, and the fear came upon every soul, and many wonders and signs were done. And so we see this even a very interesting thing, that even before signs and wonders could take place, power ministry there was fear of God. People saw this love among these people, the intense fellowship, the intense love and unity among them, and the fear came upon the people just because of this. And when that happened, signs and wonders took place. If there is no unity in the church, the body of Christ, no signs and wonders can really take place, and the church then doesn't grow. And so it's very important for them. The fifth thing that happened was that signs and wonders took place in this early church. Lots of signs and wonders, and we know all about that. Then in verse 44 we read, and all those who believed were together and had all things in common. Verse 45, and sold their possessions and goods and divided them among all as anyone had need. We see here again that the church is not just sharing its spiritual blessings, but the church is also sharing its material blessings. Whatever they had, they shared with each other, because they are family members. I have 2 shirts and you have no shirt, I give you one of my shirts. I have 2 slices of bread and you have no bread, so I share my bread with you. So it's just part of the family. It was not a great sacrifice, because they were just family members together. This kind of relationship when we begin to share. But it's very important for us to remember that tithing is now out and sharing is in. Everything that you have belongs to other believers. And when we get this understanding, the kingdom grows. And the next thing, and then we see in chapter 5 and verse 32 onwards, and those who believed were of one heart and one soul, and neither did anyone say that any of the things he possessed was his own, but they had all things in common. And in verse 34, nor was there anyone among them who lacked, for all who were possessors of lands or houses sold them and brought the proceeds of the things that were sold. So here we see that earlier we read that they bought and sold, but earlier we read that they sold their possessions and divided them among themselves. It doesn't mean that if they had only one house, they sold it, and if they had a small piece of land, they sold it. It doesn't mean that at all. In 5:34 we read, those who had houses and those who had lands. It's in plural. So if you had more than one house and you didn't have any use of it, you sold it. Or if you had more land than you could use, you sold it. And very interestingly, it says that they brought and put it at the feet of the apostles. So sharing of material blessings was very important. And then next thing we read is in 46, verse 46. So continuing daily with one accord in the temple and breaking bread from house to house, they ate their food with gladness and simplicity of heart. So now a very interesting phenomenon is taking place. They're going to the temple every day with one accord, and then next in the same sentence we hear that they are having meal on their table. Now, going to the temple with one accord, we often think they must have gone to worship, but this doesn't happen, because this is not what they're going there for. Jesus had told them when He'd chosen them that follow me and I will make you fishers of men. Now Jesus is gone, and now it's time for them to function as fishers of men. And the best fishermen know when to go, where to go. They don't go in the middle of the day for fishing. They don't go and just put their net in any place. They know exactly, which is usually early in the morning, very early in the morning. They go and they know exactly where the fish is, and that's where they will put their net. So they know at this early church where the people will be, where the fish will be. And the Jews gathered in the temple 5 times a day, and so they select their time and the place. All the Jews are there, the devout Jews are there, the seekers are there. They're looking for the Lord, so that's where they go. In the next chapter, in chapter 3, we read that they went to the temple at the time of prayer. Not to pray. It doesn't say when they pray. They just went there at the time of prayer. They went at the time of prayer because Jews gathered together to pray at certain times. And so this is the best time for fishing. So they, with one accord, they have a plan, well-planned strategy of what they're going to do in the temple. They go 2 by 2, they have different gates, and they enter through different gates, and then they talk to people. In chapter 4, verse 2, we read they're talking to the people, they're teaching the people. In verse 46 of chapter 2, we read, so continuing daily with one accord in the temple and breaking bread from house to house, they ate their food with gladness and simplicity. Now, they're going to the temple every day, and we just presume that they have gone to the temple to worship. But that is probably not the case, because very rarely Jesus went to the temple, and when he did go to the temple, it was always confrontation with the authorities over there. And now, if they did not go to worship when Jesus was alive, there does not seem any point in going when the curtain in the temple has been rent. So they're going with one accord. That means they're going with a well-planned strategy to the temple, and the strategy is very simple. Jesus had told them that he had asked them in the very beginning of his ministry, follow me and I will make you fishers of men. Now the time Jesus is gone, and the time for them has to come to do fishing of men, and temple is the best place because that's where the devout Jews gather at prayer times. 5 times a day they gathered over there. And so they're going to practice catching fish now in the temple. And in the chapter 3 we read that John and Peter go to the temple at the time of prayer. In verse 1 we read they go at the time of prayer. It doesn't say they're going to pray because that's when people gathered over there. And they went over there to catch people. And in chapter 4 verse 2 we find that they are teaching people, they're discipling people, and the authorities in the temple just simply do not like this, and so they are imprisoned, they're jailed, and all kinds of persecution takes place. So it is not going there just early Christians going to the temple to worship. And we go over there, and in this sentence is a very interesting sentence. They went to the temple with one accord, and next thing in the same sentence we read that they are breaking bread together. And so they went over there and they talked to the people and they told them about Jesus. And I imagine conversation went something like this, that when they were in the temple he said, hello brother, what are you doing here? And so, what do you mean by what are you doing here? We've come here to pray. Okay. What are you praying? And of course they say, what do you pray? We always pray the same prayer. We are praying for the Messiah to come. So they would say, I see. But the Messiah has already come. When did Messiah come? He says, well, come with us. And they would take them home, and then they would tell them, take them to their dining tables, and over the dining tables that they would tell them about the Messiah, all those things which were prophesied in the Old Testament, that he would be born in Bethlehem, that he would be born of Virgin Mary, that he would do signs and wonders, and that he would be crucified, that he would suffer, and that he would resurrect. They showed from the scriptures. And that's how they discipled them. And as they discipled, this was all done not in a special building, not in the church building which didn't exist, but on the dining tables, Jewish dining tables. And Jewish dining tables are known as benshin. And benshin is a table that Jewish table always has certain things on the table. They always have this bread in a plate covered with cloth, and they have a bottle of wine, and they have olive oil, and they have salt, and if they are living by the seaside or the lakeside, they would have some fish, broiled fish, and since they were shepherding community, they would often have cheese, and so there was quite a meal normally found on the Jewish table. And these people would come, and as they discipled them and they got hungry, the discipling would go on for long hours, and they would eat bread, and they would drink wine with it, and this is the place where the entire Jerusalem city was discipled. And in chapter 4, verse 4, we read another 5,000 men coming to the Lord. So this was a very, very rapid growth of the church taking place, and it was not in the meetings, but informal meetings, but they were all taking place. The dining table is the best place for discipling the nations. And we read in verse 47, praising God and having favor with all the people, and the Lord added to the church daily those who were being saved. And here we see the result of this, that the Lord was adding to the numbers daily. They met daily, they met every day, they went to the temple every day, they got people to their homes, they shared their material blessings, they shared their bread and wine, and they shared the scriptures, and then we see the Lord adding to their numbers daily. This is the first century church. This is the Jerusalem church, the first church itself. We see that in the next few years, as the disciples went to the temple and discipled people, brought them to their homes, within a few years, the Jerusalem temple was pretty well emptied. The whole city was discipled, as I said earlier, on the dining tables, and the Lord added to their numbers daily. Because this church met every day in the homes of people, hundreds and thousands of homes were opened up as house churches, and people were being discipled every day there, and they were sharing their bread, and they were sharing their material blessings. The whole city was discipled, and very soon we hear the accusation from the temple authorities that they have turned the city upside down. So we see these 7 things happening in this early church. The first is apostolic teaching. The second is fellowship, koinonia, intense fellowship, family fellowship. The third thing that is happening, they eat together. Because they're a family, they always have meals together. Now, fourth thing, when they pray intercessory prayers. And the fifth thing we see that they're doing is they have signs and wonders. It's a church which has works of power. There's demonstration of power. Evil spirits are being chased out, and the sick are being healed. Then we see sixth thing that's happening is that they are sharing the material blessings with each other, so nobody has lack of anything. Seventh thing, we see that they have a well-planned strategy, action plan to disciple the nations. And within a very short time, they have discipled the whole city, and now very soon they'll be ready to go outside the city and to the ends of the earth. And when this happens, all these 7 things happen, then the Lord adds to your numbers daily. And we find in our modern day churches, they are greatly deficient in all the other things. We have a lot of activities, but we often don't have these activities which enlarge the kingdom, that advance the kingdom. If we are serious that our church is the body of Christ, then we should also see that the people are being discipled every day, and that the Lord is adding to our numbers daily. These are very basic principles of church growth that are found in this chapter, Acts 2:42 to 47. And we need to study this chapter carefully and see that they are implemented in our churches. And when we do these things, we give priority to these things, we will find that our churches will also grow very rapidly, and the nations will be discipled, which is the mandate of the church. May God bless you.